which is your occupation on UFO phenomena. Okay.
Right, well, my name is... Shall I look at you or camera?
Me.
At you, got it. Okay. My name is Hilary Evans. Although I work as a librarian, I am really... oh, shit.
Go on.
Okay. My name is Hilary Evans. I work as a librarian, but in my spare time I have been following, for the last 50 years or so, ever since I was a schoolboy, strange things, mysterious things. And of all those strange and mysterious things, I think nothing is more strange, more mysterious than what we call unidentified flying objects, UFOs. Not because they are so extraordinary in themselves, as because from one simple thing, the flying saucer, they have stretched out into a much wider thing, myths of all kind, of extraterrestrial beings who come into our bedrooms, of circles on the ground, all kinds of extra myths which have surrounded the central myth. And that makes it not only a very complicated, but also a very fascinating field to research. And that's why I spend so much time there.
Which are the most important results you achieved in 30 years of work?
Well, I don't claim to have achieved very much personally. I hope I've been part of a change of opinion which has come to see that primarily the UFO problem is one of the people who see them and the people who investigate them. So not only are we looking at the things up there in the sky, but we're also looking at the people who see them and then the people who talk to the people who have seen them. And only when you have understood the way their minds are working are you going to know whether you can or not believe in the thing itself. So yes, that I think is the most important area of research, is what I call the psychosocial approach, which is looking at the phenomenon first of all as a human problem, one that involves human beings. It's not a question of nuts and bolts. It's not a question of alien spacecraft. I'm not saying it couldn't be, but I don't think it is, and certainly most of it isn't.
Thank you. Tutto bene?
Benissimo.
Okay. Let's talk about the phenomena of balls of light. You know something?
Yes, indeed. In my opinion, balls of light represent the most important aspect of the UFO phenomenon. In itself, a ball of light is nothing. It's just a globe of light. What could be simpler? What could be less interesting? But it's the circumstances in which they are seen. Now, most UFOs are seen by somebody who is out in the country, who, no matter where. He sees something. He's probably by himself, and he tells somebody else about it. He tells the investigator. So the investigator doesn't see anything at all. He only knows what the other person has seen. In other words, second hand. But with the case of balls of light, there are 3 locations in the world where these have been seen sufficiently frequently that it's possible for investigators to go to that place, set up their cameras, set up their instruments, and observe the phenomenon first-hand instead of second-hand. Now this makes a tremendous difference, because instead of being seen by somebody who is a butcher or a baker who just happens to see such a thing, these things are being investigated, I won't say by scientists, but people who've studied the subject. And so they can bring to it, first of all, objectivity, and second, some knowledge, some experience, which enables them to evaluate it. So we have 3 places. There's Yakima in Washington State on the west coast of America, where the circumstances were a big national park. That is to say, a park full of trees in a very hot country. Well, like in Italy, the trees are very much at risk in the summer. So what you do, obviously, you put up tall towers with people at the top who are looking all the time to see if there's any fire, somebody's dropped a match, lit a cigarette or something. So what you have is a wide open space with lots of towers with people looking. Perfect for observing UFOs. And as a result, we got an extraordinary number of sightings in that area of balls of light. They're very boring if you see the photographs. They took photographs. They're just little balls of light, nothing. But they were seen performing in very strange ways, doing strange things, and they were seen many, many times. So that's one. The second one was in Piedmont, in Missouri, in Central America. What happened there was that Harley Rutledge, who is a professor of engineering at Cape Girardeau University, one day his students came up to him and said to him, "Hey, Prof, what do you think about these lights up there on the mountain?" And he said, "What lights?" And they said, "Well, there's these strange lights." And he said, "Well, it's nothing to do with me. You know, I'm a professor of physics." And then he started thinking, well, perhaps it is something to do with me. Perhaps it is the sort of problem that a professor should be able to solve. So he went up on the mountain at the weekend. He thought, well, a few weekends, we go up there with our things, we camp out, we have a nice barbecue, we have a nice time, and at the same time we take our instruments and our pictures. So he thought perhaps 3 weekends solved the problem. 7 years later, he writes his book. And it's amazing what he saw there, because they had instruments. This wasn't just a case of people saying, "This is what I saw." This was instruments, objective. And they had one there and one there, so they could triangulate, which means they could find out where the object was, how big it was, how fast it was moving, the course it was going, everything about it. So these are documented sightings, instrumentally documented, not just human. So that was interesting, very valuable. But more than that, over and over again, I think in 58 cases, there was a record of the fact that the balls in the sky had changed in what seemed to be a response to the people, the observer. That is to say, the people would come to a campsite, they'd see a light, so they stop their car and say, "Look out." And up till then it was white. Suddenly it becomes red. Or it's one light and it suddenly becomes two. Or it's two and it becomes one. Or instead of going up and down, it's going that way. It's changing. It's as if it's saying to them, "I know you're looking at me. Look, you know." So, you know, you get something really quite unique. And moreover, Harley Rutledge says, now he says, I'm a scientist. This is him talking. I'm a scientist. I wouldn't say this to many people, but he said, I know that on about 20 occasions they changed when I was just thinking or talking. There was no movement, nothing like that, but they were somehow... Now, this may be true, it may not. He may be imagining it. But we're talking about a scientist. We're not talking about somebody out in the street there. So I think that's the Yakima. But the third and the most important is in Norway, in Hessdalen. Well, I've been to Hessdalen, and it's like going to the end of the world. It's a wonderful place, but it's nowhere. I won't say it's desert, but it's not very different. And in this little valley, they have seen lights moving up the valley. They have seen a light which must be several meters in diameter, which who knows what light can be as big as that. They have seen it moving for 30 minutes. They have seen it crossing a distance of 20 kilometers, quite slowly, stopping, moving on, stopping. So that is something quite extraordinary, whatever it is. And obviously it couldn't be... They photographed it 500 times now, at least. And they photographed it in front of mountains. So you've got the mountain there and you've got the thing there. So it's not a satellite, it's not a star, it's not a mirage. Equally, it's not a jeep on the ground or a person with a torch or anything like that. Obviously, I think it's a natural phenomenon. But it's a natural phenomenon that science doesn't know about. It's something really remarkable. And what's more, they had the same experience as Harley Rutledge in America, in that they, not quite the same, but amongst their instruments was a laser. And they had this object coming overhead like this, and it was going junk, 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 junk. They point the laser at it, and immediately goes junk, 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 junk. Switch off, junk, junk, junk. They did this 8 times. Now that is not coincidence. That is some kind of intelligent or mechanical response. But what is responding? Why?
Yes.
So yes, that's a very long answer to a very short question. What do I think of balls of light? Balls of light are the most interesting, the most important part of the UFO phenomenon because of this very high quality of the observation.
We have a lot of documentation about it.
Enormous, yes.
Okay. And so we can't imagine which is the nature. Probably is a natural origin of the phenomena.
No. I don't think there's any... we're certainly not looking at the supernatural. We're not looking at extraterrestrial. So we must be looking at natural. It's not man-made. It's something from nature. But...
not alien.
Not alien, I don't think so. It does nothing else, you see. It doesn't attack people. It doesn't communicate with them. It responds, but it doesn't communicate.
Okay. And what about crop circles?
Well, crop circles is, of course, what can we say? It's a mystery within a mystery. There's no doubt at all that crop circles exist. They started to appear in the field, and as you remember, to begin that they were very simple. And so Terence Meaden, the meteorologist, English meteorologist, worked very hard to develop a theory about how they could be created. And I still believe he was right. I have strong belief, because he showed, as a scientist, that it was possible for vortices in the air to go down and create patterns on the ground. He also showed that the same vortices could create luminous gas at the top, which would be in the shape of a saucer, which could be mistaken for a UFO. So with the same theory, he explained both the circles on the ground and the sighting of luminous objects. But then, hardly had he formulated his theory than the more complicated shapes began to appear. And he tried to explain those, and he failed, of course. And the reason he failed was that they weren't natural. They were, as we know, hoaxes. But then more mystery came, because then we had those 2 people, I forget what their names were, Doug and Jeff or something or other, who insisted that they had, in fact, hoaxed them all. This was almost impossible. I think it was impossible that they could have done. But, so there, like all these mysteries, it created more and more mysteries. In fact, I contributed to a book about crop circles myself, and I formulated a kind of model. I said, what happens is, first of all, you get the core phenomenon, and then other people see it, and so this thing starts to grow into something like that. And then you get other kinds of things imitating it, and then you get people pretending to do it, and all this makes it more and more complicated. So after a bit you don't know which are the true circles, which are the hoax ones, which were the hoax ones that were really done by the people that said they did, and which weren't, and so on. So many people telling lies. And also you get, of course, all the people with their own extravagant theories. I mean, I've got a book about crop circles here. It's unbelievable. Oh yes, they are signs written on the ground by beings up there. Now, can you imagine somebody in a very distant part of the galaxy saying, I have a message for the people of Earth. And so I think instead of going to President Clinton and saying, hello, I've got a message for you. They say, what we will do is we will go to one corner of this little island off the coast of Europe. We will go to this part, we will find one little part of it, and we will do strange shapes in the crops, and that will be a sign that we are sending a message. I mean, it's so stupid that you can't believe there is a human being capable, and yet I've got it.
Well, some people say that they are religious symbols, that they are a religious nature, and someone says that those symbols, we can find those symbols also in ancient pictures of the history of man. What about?
Well, of course, first of all, you have to remember that a lot of them are hoaxes. So a lot of those will have been made by people who knew perfectly well what the symbols were. So some of those, and the rest could be coincidence. Who can really say which, what are the limits to coincidence? Certain shapes are going to be repeated, sometimes because they occur in nature, sometimes because they occur in the mind. So, I mean, the pyramid, for instance, you see, how can you say that a pyramid is a symbol or a sign of anything? Because you find it in South America, you find it in Egypt, you find similar things in, well, everywhere.
Yes.
So, when it comes to crop circles, I do believe it's a genuine scientific mystery. But at the same time, I think it has nothing to do with UFOs, nothing to do with people up there. It's a purely terrestrial phenomenon. Very interesting.
And we don't know, of course, the nature of this phenomena.
Well, I think Terence Meaton is basically right. I think it is a vortice that is set up by a particular combination of temperature, the terrain, the weather, the heat, the humidity. It all acts together and under certain circumstances. Because why else should it happen only at one time of year and in certain places, in certain kinds of country?
Okay. What about of abductions?
Stop.
Change now.
Oh. Well, it could be somebody phoning, maybe.
Bye.
Oh, okay. We are ready.
So, on abductions now.
Abductions.
Where do I start? Well, I think perhaps I should start by saying that, how long ago was it? A very long time ago. So I think it must have been around about 1980. I gave a talk to Bufora at a conference in which I said, what can we learn from the liars and lunatics? Which wasn't very polite. I wouldn't say that now, but I said it then. And what I was talking about was abductions, because I believed then, as I believe now, that abductions have really nothing to do with UFOs. The only connection is that the people who have these so-called experiences are using the UFO as the metaphor for their experience, the language of their experience, if you like. Their experience might just as well have been meeting the Virgin Mary, meeting who knows what, but they have chosen, when I say they have chosen, I mean their subconscious mind has chosen to express it in terms of extraterrestrials. And so the whole story is told like a story by extraterrestrial visitation. But we must remember that there is not one single case of an abductee being witnessed by anybody else. Okay, Bart Hopkins will tell you different. Bart Hopkins will say he has witnesses. But if you think in particular of the latest case, the one in his book Witnessed, the Linda Napolitano case, you will find that yes, he has witnesses. The two most important of them, he doesn't know their names. He's never met them. He has only had letters from them or spoken to them on the telephone. What kind of witness is that? So you can't really, he says, witnessed, and that's the book is called, Witnessed, but it's not witnessed at all, in any real scientific sense of the word. So what we're talking about is what people say happened to them. Now this is still very remarkable, because we have at the very least, thousands, at a maximum tens, hundreds of thousands of people who are saying this happened to them. Now that is extraordinary. And what is even more extraordinary is that their stories are very similar. They come up with the same details, quite often quite unusual aspects of the story. And this again is, a remarkable thing. So I'm not trying to say that abductions aren't a remarkable phenomenon. All I'm saying is they have nothing to do with UFOs. Nothing really to do with UFOs. So I think my approach, which is that of course, many other people, is a psychosocial one. We're looking for an individual who is having a personal experience, but at the same time, that experience is shaped by the society he or she belongs to. So it's psycho, me, social, the round, and the two come together. So he or she is having a strange experience, so strange that normally one wouldn't have any words for it, but the words come from outside, they come from society, they come from the whole thing we have now of extraterrestrial life. And so that is the language, and that is the metaphor.
And if the problem is the consistency of witnesses, what about the case of Woodbridge and, Mr. Walton in America, where someone says that there were 6 persons just for witnesses?
Well, once again, we have only their word for it. We have no supporting evidence. We have only what the people say. So we must never forget that there is no objective thing. They've got not a single artifact, not a single trace on the ground. I'm not saying there aren't, but nothing that is really convincing. And in fact, when they do produce evidence, for instance, the well-known thing of implants, which a lot of believers believe that the aliens have put something into body, usually in the nose or the bum or anywhere, and this is some kind of monitoring device. But nobody's found one. They have little marks in the ground. But if I was to take my clothes off now, you would see all over my body scratches, marks, moles, this, that, and the other. I'm covered with strange little bits and pieces, cuts and things. And everybody has these. I could find you, I'm sure I could find you the mark of an implant or a scar or something. So it's ridiculous. So, if anybody was to find one tomorrow, then I would be ridiculous. But until then, they're ridiculous. So what else about abductions? As I say, the experience, I think, is a genuine one. These people are, in some way, working out some kind of personal problem. It's very hard to say what. I think it varies from one individual to another. Do you want me to tell you the story about the English girl and the space woman?
Yes.
Okay. That I told you before.
Yeah.
I mean, the case which started me off on this whole business of trying to find out what's going on was a case which happened to me several years ago. I was invited to go and investigate a case involving UFOs, but it turned out to have a whole lot of further things surrounding it. And so I was invited to come in and sort of contribute as I could. It was a very interesting case. It was a girl who at this time was 17, but when she was 12, 5 years before, she had come back from school one afternoon, gone up to her bedroom, and a couple of minutes later, an extraterrestrial entity had come into the room, a spacewoman, she called her, and sat down beside her and talked. And this spacewoman had become a kind of friend, not exactly the sort of friend you make at school, but more a kind of guardian or a guide, somebody that Glenda could talk to. And she didn't always see her. Sometimes she was just aware that she was there. But it became an important part of her life for many years. And at the end of the investigation, the mother in particular asked me, what did I think of it? How could I explain this? And I had no explanation. And I was ashamed of myself because I was asked there to give an explanation, and I hadn't one. I couldn't work out what was happening. And so I went away thinking, how could I have done better? And what helped me was about a year later, I met a French girl who claimed to have seen the Virgin Mary. It was a big thing. She was on television a lot, and most people decided she hadn't seen the Virgin. She insisted she had. I don't think she saw the Virgin either. I've never told her so. She doesn't know I'm sceptical. I've always been very sympathetic. And I remember she wrote to me once. She said, I did see the Virgin. She believes it. And I got to thinking about her and about Glenda and what they both had in common, the two girls, who both had experiences which were unbelievable. And gradually I came to the conclusion that what all these people have in common is some kind of need. They need somebody to help them. It may not be help in the normal sense of the word, but everybody, a teenager in particular, needs to be able to confide in somebody, to share their problems. They may be not problems to you and me, but when you're a teenager you have very different kinds of problems, and they are very real, very intense. When I think how I used to worry about things which today I just laugh at, they matter very much. And I think that what was happening for instance, the French visionary, I think what was happening was that the Virgin Mary, or something, appeared to her and said, okay, Blondine, I understand your parents don't understand you, you go to school and the girls don't understand you, your teachers don't like you, nobody likes you, but I like you, and that's more important. And I think this is what made Blondine, gave her the confidence she needed. And I think the same was true of the English girl. So really, in order to understand what's happening, you would have to carry out a psychiatric study of each person. And of course this is impossible. So this is only speculation on my part. However, I've met sufficient people now and talked to them about their experiences and read and so on to feel fairly confident in my theory. I've never come across anything which makes me doubt it. Every case I read about makes me feel more and more strongly. For instance, there was one of Bud Hopkins's cases, what he calls the Kathy Davis case. I don't know if you know this case, but it was a girl who was very, very ill all her childhood, and then she started being abducted over and over again by the aliens who made her pregnant, and then when she was pregnant, when she got a fetus inside her, they came and took her away and took the fetus out, and so she wasn't pregnant anymore, and so on. So she had a whole series of extraordinary adventures. Now, the only account of this is by Bud Hopkins. Obviously, nobody else has met her or nobody has investigated her. So, but even from Bud Hopkins's account, who believed all this, there are enough indications of what was happening for me to feel justified in offering an alternative explanation. Kathy was, at the age of 16, 17, a typical, very precocious, very sophisticated American girl. She would have her own car, drive around, she would go around with friends, they would go around having exciting time, they would go into drive-in cafes and all the rest of it, pick up boys. She had a lot of sex. At that time, it was not all that common, but for American girls, it wasn't so unusual. So here we have a girl who enjoys a good time. Her idea of fun is to go out in the car with boys, have sex, and so on. Fine, nothing wrong with that. So she becomes pregnant. She thinks she really is pregnant, so she tells her current boyfriend, you've got to marry me, and he accepts the fact, so they get married. And they do, in fact, have afterwards, they have two small children. And then at the age of, I forget, let's say 22, he walks away. He doesn't really like her. He probably didn't want to marry her in the first place. It was only because she was pregnant. So he walks out. So now we have a girl of 22 with two small children. She's fat. She's not very beautiful. She isn't rich, she isn't charming or intelligent or witty. She's nothing. She's just a boring, plain girl with 2 small babies. But she likes sex. We all do. Everybody does. She would like to have a boyfriend. She would like glamour and excitement. But who is going to take out a fat girl with 2 babies? So she is in a very unhappy situation. You know, she sits at home watching television, fat babies screaming, no money, and that kind of thing. And she watches television, and she sees Bud Hopkins. Bud Hopkins says, you know, of course, a lot of people have been abducted by aliens. And she says, yes, that's it. That's what happened to me. Now, I'm not saying she made this up. She really believed it. It comes from inside her. She created this fantasy life, and this is what she's expressing. It's a fantasy because of her personal situation, but shaped, as I said before, by the social idea, the idea that Bud Hopkins had put into her mind of what the experience might be. So it's a combination of the two.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Caspita. Macchine le senti che passano? No, non dà fastidio. Okay. Incredible. Yes, I have about autopsies, alien autopsies. These are the questions of Maurizio, and he says that you can tell me something very interesting about alien autopsy, alien Santilli film. Don't you know?
I don't know much about it. It's just nonsense. I mean, it's. I mean, I haven't seen the whole film. I've only seen, bits but so perhaps I shouldn't give an opinion. But I mean, from what I've seen, and certainly from what I've read, I mean, I took one look at it and said, well, this is rubbish. And it is rubbish. I mean, I think everybody now believes it's rubbish. It's just a con, and it's not even a very good con. I mean, you got very strange reactions. Some people wanted to believe in it, and they managed to find, Santilli managed to find a special effects man who said, I couldn't have done this, but other special effects men say they can. I mean, I think we all know, really, that these special effects people can do almost anything. I met in France a man who worked for the French cinema, and he told me at the height of the crop circle phenomenon how he had created, they paid him to do this, to make a crop circle. He did it at a time when somebody said it couldn't be faked. In half an hour he did a perfect one. You know, he just worked out, because he's got all the experience, he was able to do it. And I've got a picture in one of the books there, which I could show you, of a friend of mine standing beside a landed flying saucer. This was done with no equipment, no special equipment, in the back garden of the house by a friend of my friend. Okay, he was an expert. He was a professional special effects person, but he was able to fake this brilliant photograph. And he did it in no time at all, with no problem. So you can fake anything. So the Santilli thing, it could be a fake, and to my mind, without any question at all, it is.
I know I saw a movie in which we can see a crop cycle that is making by some balls of light. They are going and circulating over a field, and in a certain way at once appears the crop cycle, and then the balls went away. Well, I don't know if you ever seen a film.
I haven't seen that.
Okay, but we think it's a special effect.
Of course.
Do you think there's enough ability in people to make easier and cheaper special effects with small cameras, with simple cameras?
Well, you need to know what you're doing. But there's a lot of mythology about how difficult things are. For instance, the Gulf Breeze photographs of Ed Walters, it was claimed by experts that it was not possible to do a double exposure with his camera. But a friend of mine investigated and found that, in fact, the model of camera he was using was a rather primitive one. And it was perfectly possible to do a double exposure with a Polaroid camera, which is supposed to be not possible, but it is possible. And remember that Ed Walters was he was a practical joker who had done many tricks in the past with children just to amuse them, to entertain them. He knew about playing around with cameras. He'd already done it. And so when the experts come along and say, oh no, it couldn't possibly be fake, I say, oh no. I think almost anything can be faked.
And how can be faked the phenomenon of the balls of lights? Not the balls you said before, but balls rotating and splitting and so on. How could you imagine this faked?
I'm not an expert. I couldn't give you any theory about the best way to do it. But I don't doubt for one moment that... sorry about that.
No. No problem.
Bye.
UFO phenomena and UFO specialists. Who is an UFO specialist in your opinion?
The two best, the names I would put at the top, one is American, Richard Haynes, and one is Spanish, Ballester Olmos. To my mind, those are the two best investigators that I've ever met. They've both done fantastic amount of work, and everything I've seen of theirs is solid, honest, dedicated. No, they're not trying to prove yes or no. They're just trying to find out what happened. So I would put them at the top of my list.
Yes, but the question was, which is the model, a person, which is the model, the typical model of of serious UFO specialists, in your opinion? Which is the work a man has to do to begin a UFO specialist?
Well, first of all, he must read all the literature. You're talking about the things he must do. Yes. So, first of all, he must know about the subject. A very great number of people don't know enough about it. You can see when you read somebody like John Mack, for instance, he doesn't know enough about the subject. And then you get Bud Hopkins. He talks about psychology. He doesn't know enough. Even I'm not a scientist or a clinical psychologist. I know more about psychology. He says there is no psychological model for his abductions. I know that there are psychological models because I've read books. I've read, people like, blank. What's his name? Pierre Janet, for instance, the French psychologist. You only have to read a few pages of Pierre Janet to see that it's all there. So you've got to be a very widely read person, the first thing to be a ufologist. It's not a thing you can just walk into. You must do your study. Then, of course, you must be neutral, which not to say you mustn't have opinions, but you mustn't allow your opinions to colour your thing. When you go and look at a case like, say, the Trans-en-Provence case, you must be ready to believe, but equally ready to disbelieve. The next thing, obviously, you've got to be methodical. You've got to think scientifically. You don't have to be a trained scientist to think. I mean, if you use the same criteria that you use if you go into a second-hand car showroom to buy a car, you don't take the first car. You say, well, is it going to do this? What about this? Do the doors shut? That kind of thing. Just simple common sense. Over and over again. I mean, I could, I should show you a book, really, a cover of a book. Would you like me to show it to you?
Yeah. Okay.
Just to show you, just how absurd. Do you want to come this
Yeah. Oh, Adamski.
Okay.
Incredible.
Okay, this one. Okay. Right. Here is a book, and the author of this book claimed that as a UFO picture. It is the least believable picture I've ever seen. How anybody in their right mind could think this was a picture of a UFO. I mean, it's quite clearly a diorama in a museum, and it's quite clear that those lights up there are the reflection of the lights in the museum. It's so obvious that a child would know what that is. And yet this was put on the front cover of a serious book. Shall I put it in? So when you get responses like this, the mind, you just say, is there anything so stupid as a human being?
Yes.
But what is really weird, you see, is I have met, well, take one woman that I met. She came up to me after I'd given a lecture. This was in Canada. She was a Canadian woman. And she came up to me and she was well dressed, intelligent, spoke clearly, absolutely lucid. I'm sure when she went to Tesco or the shops to do her shopping, she managed perfectly well. I'm sure she drove the car quite correctly, everything else. And she told me how every evening the extraterrestrials come to her in her kitchen. They've been working all day with the Mexican government to find a cure for cancer, and they've come to her kitchen to tell her what they've done that day. And she tells me all this quite clearly, just like I'm talking to you. And I say, oh yes, that's very interesting. What else can you say? It's absolutely astonishing. It's
strange. So, did you ever direct experience about UFOs? So, have you ever saw it?
I've seen things in the sky I can't explain. Until 2 years ago, I would have said no. But 2 years ago, now this is very boring, I warn you. I was out in the garden, just out there. It was a day, a summer day, but overcast. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't cloudy, but the air was thick. So the visibility wasn't very good. But it was bright. And I was looking up and I saw, just from one horizon to the other, an object cross the sky, like that. I couldn't say it had any shape. I couldn't say I was seeing all of it. It looked to me just like a small ball. But it was too high for that. But it wasn't very high. It couldn't have been because the visibility wasn't good enough. Clearly it wasn't a balloon because it was going steady. It wasn't going with the wind. It was going across from the wind. It wasn't anything that I could recognize. Naturally, what I believe it was a low-flying satellite of some kind, which is much too low for a satellite to be. It shouldn't have been there. It's illegal, it's dangerous. It could have hit an aeroplane, because I don't think it was very high up. So I would have said it was lower than a high-flying aircraft. So whatever it was, I don't think it ought to have been there. But who knows what the government is doing. So I really do not know what that was. So in the strict sense of the word, I have seen a UFO. In the sense I've seen an object which was flying that I couldn't identify. But to say that I've seen an alien spacecraft or even anything like it is no. But anybody has had strange things seen in the sky. I was talking to our receptionist at the library, and she was telling me, a strange thing she saw on holiday. Something, it was just something that came out of the sea, and it wasn't a rocket. It was something more substantial than that. But what was it? She doesn't know.
Okay. Which is the method you use to establish if a deposition is true or false? Is there a method?
Well, the first test for me is what we call a gut reaction. Is this person credible? Now, I have met, as I was mentioning earlier, I've met Ed Walters, who I know was a liar and seemed perfectly credible. So obviously that is not enough. We have all met people so plausible that even though we're convinced that they are telling lies, we could believe what they say. So you must have some objective tests. Well, obviously well, for instance, I was investigating a case down in Bristol, and the wife who had the experiences told me the experiences, but I directed most of my questions not to her, because she told me all that, but to the husband, who was very sceptical. And when he confirmed everything she said, even though I think he didn't want to, but then I thought, well, this is something good. So I think the most important thing is obviously to just get it's the same as triangulation, to get approach from two things. If you can get objective testimony, some kind of circumstantial thing, but photographs are very dubious, as we all know. Even video is very dubious. Everything is dubious. So you must look at everything with suspicion. But obviously the more witnesses and the more independent, the better.
What should happen to say that a sighting or something else is really an alien and extraterrestrial sighting? What should happen? What kind of documents you need?
Well, it would have to be... I mean, we've seen many cases that if they are true, there is no other explanation but they are alien, because they could not conceivably be terrestrial. But always the question, are they true? Did the witness really see what is it? So what you've really got to do is to establish beyond any conceivable doubt that what the witness said he saw, he really saw. And since that's almost impossible to do, I mean, you'd have to come up with so many different kinds of corroboration. You'd have to have his own account, you'd have to have at least one independent person, you'd have to have some kind of documentation, because they could be friends, even or communicating by telepathy. You know, there's always something. So you'd still have to have some kind of objective thing, and you'd have to make sure that objective thing hadn't been manipulated. So it's really almost impossible.
I want to ask you some important questions. The most important.
You've gone to a lot of trouble.
No, yes, but I don't want to ask you all because I don't. Do you think that NASA or I don't know the European Space Agency have some documents, or they have understood something else, something more we don't know about UFO phenomena, and they don't want to reveal it to the world?
No, I don't think so. I think that if, you see, we've just had this book by Corso has just been published, in which he claims that the military, and indeed the whole military, political, top financial, economic, all the power in America has been aware for 50 years that there really was a saucer crash at Roswell, which implies that there really is extraterrestrial life and that extraterrestrials really are visiting the Earth. I just simply do not believe that such a secret could be kept by so many people with so many different personal agendas. They all hated each other. It's not possible that they would cooperate. And also, I think you have to ask yourself, if they kept it, if they had this certain knowledge that a flying saucer had crashed, they knew without any doubt at all, it wasn't a question of possibility or anything like that, they knew because they'd got one. If that was true, they would be guilty of a terrible crime, in my opinion, a moral crime, in not telling the rest of us. We have a right to know, and I think really important people, statesmen, would know this. They would say we have no right to keep this secret, just because it's to our political or military advantage. I mean, just for instance, the American government at one time was putting a lot of money into the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, the SETI thing, and it's maintaining observatories, astronomy is being carried on, you know, at vast expense all over America. Huge, very expensive equipment. All those people are looking for extraterrestrial life. And yet the government, if the government knew all the time that they already knew the answer, there is. And they're spending all this money knowing that they don't have to spend it because the answer has already been found. No, it just doesn't make sense. There's no way I can bring myself to believe that there was a successful cover-up.
So there's not a cover-up?
No. I don't mean to say that there wasn't power games being played between the CIA, the FBI, the military, the Navy, the Air Force, people keeping things to themselves. I believe that. because everybody, all these people play little games. You know, I've got a bit of a this and that. But if it was a really big, important secret, no.
Which are the most important events in Europe about UFO? Events, I mean, yes, events in which you have the suspect, they are really strange events. The nature of those could be, I don't know, a military advanced experimental machine or so on. Which are the most...
Well, you take something like the Belgian UFO wave, which I think most intelligent ufologists believe, but by no means all, believe to have been something like a military device or something of that kind. Certainly Wim van Utrecht, who is one of the best investigators in Belgium, that's the conclusion he reaches, which is different from Sobeb's. I mean, to me, all along, it didn't sound right. It was, when you get triangular black shapes moving through the sky, I immediately say stealth. Okay, it may not be actually stealth, but I mean something of that kind. We're talking about devices similar to aircraft. And if we're talking about that, then I think we're talking about aircraft of some kind. I'm not saying there isn't a lot of very strange aspects of it. Is it really true that the Americans would test their devices over Central Europe like that? It seems very strange, but it's the best answer. It's not a good answer, but it's the best we have.
There are some movies about NASA missions. I was thinking about experiments, machines, and so on. NASA mission on which you can see that there are some balls or some strange objects moving in the atmosphere over the shuttle or down the shuttle, near the shuttle. Which is your opinion about this kind of movies?
I think we're talking now in such a specialist field where so many things can, I wouldn't say go wrong with a camera. A camera can pick up so many things. I mean, this camera you've got here, you know, all kinds of lens flares, reflections and things like that, that only an expert, and even the experts, can be wrong. I mean, Bruce Maccabee, you know, who is supposed to be an expert in camera, has made a fool of himself talking about photographs. There's no such thing as an absolute expert. But as soon as you can even offer an alternative explanation, even if it doesn't sound like good sense, then, you know, that you've got to be suspicious. It's like Uri Geller, you know, when he does some of his things. Because he's doing it in his hands, the bending keys and things like that, it's always the possibility of manipulation. I mean, what he should be doing is, if he really wanted to prove things, is, you know, making the Leaning Tower of Pisa stand up straight or something like that. You know, it's got to be a macro effect, not a micro effect.
Okay. So, which is your dream, your personal dream about the UFO phenomena?
Well, obviously, like everybody, I would love I'd love to make contact with alien civilizations. In principle, in practice, who knows? But in principle, yes, it would be lovely to find out. As regard, but then that's something separate from the UFO phenomenon. The UFO phenomenon, you see, I don't believe is an extraterrestrial thing. I think we're talking either about natural things or about man-made things. So what I would really like, my personal dream, is that people would just be a bit more intelligent. Just if they would only approach this thing. I mean, there are perhaps 100 real investigators whom I respect in the world, people who are genuinely concerned with the truth. And I think I just wish there were more of them, and I wish they had more money to carry out their research and to establish it. They're all people like myself, amateurs with other jobs, other things to do, and with no money, no resources, no scientific background for most of us. There are very few people who are really in a position to carry out good research with all the equipment they need. So that's a sort of short-term dream.
Yeah. Don't you think it could be a problem to take contact with the extraterrestrial entities?
Of course it would be a problem. Yes, no question. That would be the excitement. I mean, it's just like on a larger scale when, Captain Cook went to Australia and met the Pacific Islanders for the first time. I mean, it was dangerous, difficult, but wonderful. So yes, but it's not going to be done via UFOs. When it happens, it'll happen in a completely different way. I always think that the science fiction people usually get it right, and somebody like Arthur C. Clarke, if you read a book like Childhood's End, did you read that? I don't know what it's called in Italian, but I mean, it's a wonderful and believable account of how the contact will take place. I couldn't improve on Arthur C. Clarke.
And let's come back at last to the English, to the English aspect. Someone says that in Stonehenge and in Avebury we have the evidence of something strange about extraterrestrial and alien visits. Which is your opinion about that?
Well, I certainly don't think that. I mean, certainly both Avebury and Stonehenge are a remarkable monument to human science. I don't think they're a monument to anything else. I mean, we still don't understand them, but that doesn't mean to say that we have to look up there for the explanation. I mean, I think that this tendency to look elsewhere, when people don't realize the incredible potential of the human. I mean, what we have achieved as a human race is amazing. Unfortunately, at the same time as we've achieved so much in science, we've also achieved a very great deal in manufacturing myths, and the two have grown up side by side. And it's important that we keep the science there and the myth there, and recognize that while they interact, they are nevertheless two separate things. And I think that's what's gone wrong with, say, abductions. People are trying to make us... I mean, you hear people talking about the science of ufology. It's nonsense. It's not a science. It could be studied scientifically, but that doesn't make it a science.
Great.
Oh, you asked me about English thing.
Yeah,
Yes.
Go on.
Well, really, there's nothing I can say about the English thing that's at all positive. I myself have left Bufora, the official national thing, because I don't like the way they're going. They've gone right over to abductions. They've stopped. I wrote a letter to them, the magazine. I said, Bufora means British UFO Research Association. What about UFOs? Whatever happened to UFOs? Have you forgotten about UFOs? I mean, I've got 1,000 books there, and most of those are about the UFO phenomenon. A lot of them are about abductions and things like that as well, because I'm interested. But I don't think of them as UFO books. But there are thousands, tens of thousands of genuine mysteries in the UFO field. I think the explanations aren't going to be all that dramatic when we find them. Perhaps I should finish with an English case. This is the case. If I have one case, it's my favourite, because it's so simple and so boring. This is Manchester, one of the biggest cities in England. Every day people go into the centre of Manchester, they do their daily work, they go out again. They go out on the same bus every day, same time, that sort of thing. And so we've got this bus, it's 6 o'clock in the evening in November, and half a dozen people are on this bus. They get out, and then they all, the bus comes to the end, they all get out and start to walk towards their homes. And they look up in the sky, and flying above them, silently, is something the size of a football field, with lights all round. Somebody said it was like a huge restaurant floating in the sky. Now, 4 people saw this, and they thought it was so amazing that 2 of them went on to the police station to tell them about it. But that's the end of the story. Nobody knows to this day what happened, but 4 independent people came together and said, what on earth is that up there? Now that is a real mystery story. It's not a big sensational case, it doesn't have a book about it or anything like that, but If you can get 4 people to see something in the sky, what the bloody hell was it?
So which could be the nature?
No idea. I am absolutely as ignorant as anybody could be as to what it could be. It couldn't have... I don't see what it could have been. If it was like... And there were 4 witnesses. It wasn't just one person describing it. 4 people. They all agreed, more or less, on what it was. And it wasn't an aeroplane. It wasn't... Could it have been a balloon? An airship? Silent? Airships make a lot of noise.
Un'ora e 3 minuti, finito il nastro. Un'ora e
The
3
tape
minuti.
is finished.
No.
Look, it's moving now. Gli facciamo un po' di backstage, lui dobbiamo
Sì,
riprendere
certo.
le
Okay, are you ready?
Okay.
And go.
Okay, good.
Pier, stai lontano, Pier. Occhio, Pier. Ok, the next. Siete in inglese.
Linda,
Yeah,
it's Osprex on line 2.
thank you.
Ok, fallo andare su un altro cassetto avanti a sinistra.
You can change the desk, okay, to another one, change another one.
Okay.
Okay.
Ma fallo andare avanti
Or
di là.
during or working,
Next steps.
changing another one in another one. Yes.
Oh, let's go for the window.
Just as you are looking for something fantastic.
Yes, continue. It's okay.
The camera.
Okay, come on.
Yeah. When you're looking for something in la cassetta.
That's great. Great, it's damaged.
Molto bene.
Very good.
Molto bene.
Cabinets.
3 drawers.
3 doors.
Drawer, that's a drawer,
Yeah.
and that's a cabinet.
Uh-huh. Only UFOs, this one?
Yes.
Or on only these 3 for UFOs? Okay.
But here you have the abductions. You have there's Roswell.
Roswell?
Well, the famous. You know that picture, of course.
Oh, it's possible to make some pictures about also Roswell.
Well,
Anche
we
su
don't have-
Roswell non abbiamo molte, eh?
We haven't got very much. There's an artist's impression of that, and then there's
Oh, we can...
There's again an artist.
Also for Roswell, this one?
Yes. I don't think you've ever seen this before.
Yeah, no, I've never seen this one.
Nobody has.
This one, this is very popular.
Well, of course. Yeah.
Because it's Jesse Marcel, I think.
Yes. Well, this one is, this artist,
Yes.
this one here, he does this for us.
Mm-hmm.
So it's exclusive.
Ah.
Nobody else has that, except the artist. But this is a very interesting business because this was one of, it was an album.
Yeah.
And if you bought a certain kind of biscuit, you know, biscotti.
Yeah, biscuit, biscuits. Yes.
You got these pictures in, and then you get this album, stick them in.
Yeah.
And I only seen one copy of this book, which a friend of mine, a French researcher, has.
Yeah.
It's the only one. I would give you 500 English pounds to buy such a book. I can't find it. I've been looking for it. One day I'll find it, because I find everything sooner or later.
Yeah.
But I would love to have it. So anyway, he lent us the book, so we copied the
Yes, from
but I don't
biscuits.
think nobody has ever seen these before.
Yeah, I've never seen this one.
Because this was done in the 1950s. These pictures. It's amazing.
Incredible.
Yeah. Where are they all?
Incredible. That's also
Yes, they can.
Aztec. What is Aztec? I don't know.
Well, it's another rumor of a crash.
In America?
Yes, it's nearby. And some people...
Nearby Roswell?
Yes.
Biscuits Door Series.
Mm. It's, I think they're Belgian. I'm not sure if they're French or Belgian. But,
Yes, because it's important also for us to have some pictures, because we were in Roswell, as you said, as I said, and we saw it was just like the Oktoberfest in a certain way, you know, German. So I don't know, but it's important for us also to make.
well, from a sociological point of view,
Yeah.
it's fascinating. I mean, I'm totally sceptical about Roswell. I mean, many things, when we start talking on the interview, I'll tell you the things that I am not sceptical about, that I do believe. But when it comes to Roswell, I have no doubt in my mind.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous, the whole
Yes.
thing. But it's...
In our opinion, it could be a secret experiment
Yes,
of
for
the
sure.
US Air Force.
Yes.
Strange planes or some.
the same with the Belgian way.
Yeah. The Belgium in 1990. Yes.
So
On
I'm
Bruxelles.
sure.
Yes.
Okay. See, as you know, in Norway, in Italy, the sun comes down like that.
Yeah.
But in Norway, it goes down
Yes.
like that. So you have a very long period
Yeah.
when it's neither dark nor
Sunset.
light. So in that period, this picture was taken. There's enough light to see the mountain. It's not a satellite, it's not a star,
It's in the valley.
it's there. And yet, there's nothing
Couldn't
else.
be a fire, I don't know.
No, couldn't possibly. I think you could hear a dog bark at 30 kilometres. There's nothing. It's absolutely silent. And you're on this hill, and I mean, if that was say a Jeep or something like that, the light would be bouncing
Yes.
about and moving and so on. But no, it just moved like that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think it's a natural phenomenon.
Yeah.
But it's a huge ball of light. There is nothing in nature
Yes.
to explain it.
Yes.
So I think it is a natural phenomenon, but I think it's an unknown natural phenomenon.
Yes.
And so I think this is the most important, most interesting aspect of...
Yeah. Hai capito?
Togli.
Non va?
No, va benissimo.
Ah,
adesso.
adesso.
Non voglio...
Ah, ok, certo, non è il riflesso.
Adesso...
Fantastic pictures.
Right?
Fantastic. Want to have a look?
Looks wonderful.
Su questa in piedi però, Dario, Ok.
Sì, adesso vado-
Allora, devo anche dirti cosa sono?
Allora sì,
Questo è New Hampshire. Betty e Barney Hill driving at night see a UFO. Later they are stopped by the aliens, taken on board a flying saucer and subjected to a medical exam.
ok, vai.
Norvegia, Hersdal, Norway, e poi il resto non riesco a leggerlo. Comunque in una valle alle 19:50, una valle dove non c'era nulla, assolutamente nulla, ci sono nessun tipo di caseggiate di villaggio, ci sono queste copole.
Aspetta che forse... Ok.
Ok?
Yes, I got it. Yes, I got it. No, I don't got it. Okay, I got it.
Flying saucer which allegedly crashed near Aztec. Questa qui, New Mexico. Reported by Frank Scully with spurious data from Dr. G, but with possible basis in fact. Questa è su una scatola di biscotti.
Bellissimo. Scatola biscotti, benissimo.
You have also this
Disegno
one.
di Roswell di chi?
This is at the Foster Ranch, New Mexico. Debris supposed to be from a crashed UFO is found. Alien bodies allegedly retrieved from second sight on the plains of San Agustin.
Perfetto.
Dalla piana di San Agustin.
Questo è?
Questo è Roswell sempre. Debris of supposed flying saucer found by a rancher near Roswell, New Mexico. At first claimed as UFO, but later explained as a weather balloon. At your home you have also photos for magazines.
Jesse Marcel.
Well, not photos, I have the magazine.
Yes, magazines there too, yes. Questo è Irving Newton.
I think this is...
Stiamo. Questa qui, Adamski type UFO, allegedly photographed by Fritz Van Nest near Canab, Utah, in full daylight. Un bel lampadario.
Esatto.
Questa sui rapimenti è stupenda. Quando sei pronto, te la sostituisco.
See, he gave me this color picture, but when I saw the picture in a magazine, it was in black and white, which means that he must have, perhaps he'd met him and got the picture from him. But do you want this information or not?
Oh,
Not really.
vuoi informazioni su questo fatto oppure no?
No,
Questo
vabbè,
qua è
no,
tipo
vediamo,
no, intanto
vediamo
entriamo
il
nella...
foto.
Questo è bellissimo, se riesci a fare una carellatina, stai facendo, che banata. Abduction. Allora, New York City, Linda Napolitano, H. Cortile, is abducted by aliens from her Manhattan apartment and taken aboard their spacecraft. Ti hai sentito? Banana.
Ma che sei uno struzzo.
Anato. In a hospital at Cowichan, Vancouver Island, Canada, nurse Doreen Kendall draws back the curtains and sees this hovering UFO with occupants. Zoom. And the last. Stupenda questa cosa. And you personally...
A picture at 12 o'clock.
2 hours only.
Well, yes. Could be even quicker. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing.
Questi qui quelli licantropi che gli fanno l'autopsia stupenda. Questo è at Evley, Essex. John and Susan Day are abducted with their child in their car aboard the UFO where they undergo a physical examination by the aliens. Vado?
Aspetta. Vai.
To say it's genuine or not.
It's too technical. I couldn't. I'll show you when we get to the house. Have you heard of Wim van Utrecht from Belgium?
No.
He's a very good investigative researcher, and he and a colleague have written a book about one photograph. And even the whole, they can't prove it's a fake, but they give you all the evidence. And
Vai. Rifai tutto. E tieni più aperto. Così.
Vado?
Vai. Aspetta, no, rifai. Sei toccato il cavallo. Tieni. Ah, ti è uscito tutto? Sei troppo avanti, così vai sotto. Vai più avanti. Così. Vai. 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 Fermo così. Vai. 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 Fermo. Vai. Vai un po' più su. Ancora più su. Così. Vai.
Bless you.
Vai. Aspetta, stai lì. Vai. 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 Vai.
Questa è genuina, detto.
Sì, sì, vai, vai. Questa è Ramsky, no?
No.
Vai. 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 Vai.
Sono la più bella ufonazi.
Vai. Vai. Vai.
Incredible.
Aspetta,
Foo Fighters.
Vai. Vai.
Questa di qui no?
Aspetta.
This is a children book.
Vai.
well, the popular books we say. They're not
Right.
specifically for children,
Oh yeah.
but
Questo è di Giulio Verne, importante questa qui.
Sì, non si deve fare così comunque, vabbè, lo facciamo lo stesso. Aspetta. Vai. Vabbè, basta.
Sì, infatti.
Queste sono belle però da fare, eh?
you see,
Fermo che vado.
it's a long time ago.
Long time ago. Now the alien seems to be grey, little.
Well, it's become a stereotype,
Yes.
you see.
It's more
Fixed.
standardized.
Yes.
We found plastic aliens in America, just like teddy bears, aliens.
Oh, it's the wife of Bud Hawkins.
Yes, alien. Everything is alien in America.
Ok.
Okay.
Okay, go.
Okay, go. Go, go.
Sorry, stay there.
Just a moment. Okay, go. Yes. You can take a book and open it.
What am I going to take? Bart Hopkins?
Yes.
Yes, I should
What
think
can
so.
we say? The world.
It's an amazing book, this.
It's an amazing book.
I wrote a 20-page analysis of it.
Prima di metterlo giù, prendiamo un altro.
Okay. Instead, pick another one.
Oh, this is a better book. Do you know this book?
No.
Field Guide to Extraterrestrials by Patrick Weiss.
The field guide.
Yes, it's all the different kinds of
Oh,
things.
identicates.
Yes. He's a very nice chap.
Yeah. Try to pick another one, just to see.
It's from outer space. Don't make covers like that anymore.
From outer space to you.
An account of visitors was documented by actual photographs. This
Okay,
is something he
open,
went
open.
on.
And what about Pleiades? Do you have a book
Oh
downstairs?
yes, yes.
Oh, there.
Ok, digli di prendere, metto giù e prendere un libro alle sue spalle. Uno di questi qua
Okay,
della
if you
biblioteca.
want to take a book from that on the shoulders or in rear to you, yeah, back,
up here?
yes, in back, on the side, red one, yes,
Oh yes.
yes,
Oh, these are all the magazines.
yeah.
Flying Saucer Review.
Uno alle sue spalle.
Aspetta, fai prendere anche questo.
Mhm.
Ok, alle sue spalle allora lo faccio
Sì.
vedere. Ok, at last, a book down there, one of there.
Well, this is a very Amy Michel, right? Classic. À propos des soucoupes volantes. I can read easy Italian just about with a dictionary, but
Allora adesso digli di andare verso la sua scrivania di là dall'altra parte.
Okay, now let's go to your table and you can sit down and I don't know, we can finish. Okay.
must I be doing
Okay.
Perfetto.
Fantastic. Fantastic, really. I think you have explained the real consistency of the phenomena. Because it's also my idea, the idea of Maurizio, the idea of a lot of people. Even if we see every day movies and news on TV in which you feel that they want to believe to the alien, to the extraterrestrial, because it's business, because it's money, because people want to believe in it.
are interested for so many different reasons. Sometimes it's money, but a lot of the time it's to be important, I think, lots of it is. I mean, the Gulf Breeze man in Walton, why? But he's got fame. He gives lectures whenever he goes, people want to talk to him. This chap Corso I was talking about, this American general officer, he went to Roswell a few weeks ago, and there was an interview with him. And the moment he landed at Roswell, he was surrounded by journalists, all wanting an interview. You know, he is famous.
Yes.
And as you said, you know, if he was getting old.
That's the real consistency of the phenomenon. I think it's impossible to quick travel in the space, in the inner space, but people want to believe that we can go more quickly than speed of light. so it's I feel also that there's a sort of I don't know if it's ignorance or fantascientific culture, because people say, oh, they come from another dimension. Which dimension? They come from, they manipulate the space. They cure space. Einstein says the space is not possible. Space is cured, but cure for.
Sei pronto a girare?
Sì? Aspetta, che prendo il segno però perché non lo so.
Guarda.
Vado?
No, la rifacciamo. Vai. Fermo.
Vado? Anche a destra ce n'è uno.
Gira.
Non c'è un cazzo qua. 1887.
Yeah, I've very seldom seen any reference to this. It must be, unless it's...
That's really interesting because it's strange. The airplane was not at all built. Yeah.
But it's